B-Bad and Brandon.
Oh, Paul, how you going?
Hello? Hey, how are you going? Sorry about that. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Hello? Excellent. Sorry about that. That was not as simple as it should have been. Righto.
Mate, we're good, bro. Johnny, mate, I was the one who slipped in the DMs of yours, and then was chatting to Ben, and then my good man Brando on my left. Is that your right?
G'day. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm excellent. I'm kicking along fine.
Yeah, you are. Busy man at the moment, bro, from what I've been following.
What's that?
You're a busy human at the moment, from what I've been following.
I'm a little bit, yeah, it's been a little bit hectic. And just, what's the word? Spontaneous, which is painful when you're trying to actually organise things. Yeah.
Spontaneous. I like the word spontaneous. I like to roll a similar model. It makes it stressful for other people around you as well, who have to follow along with your spontaneity.
Goes well with combust.
Yeah.
Yeah, combustion. It goes well with that as well. Yeah.
I like it.
I love it, man.
But we only have one real official part of the show that kicks off, and that's just an opportunity to introduce you. And we just ask, we give you 21 words, have that opportunity to find out who you are and what you do. We will loosely count those words and let you have a crack, bro.
Right. All right. So like a competition type thing.
Yeah. You could. This is your chance to win.
21 words. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
When you're ready to.
So 21 words. Do you sort of say go?
Yeah. Ready, set, go.
Okay. So fuck, that's 4 already.
That's 5 now.
Yeah.
We can't laugh.
Business owner with a couple of unique skill sets and work in some unique spaces. And I guess I'm all about bringing those unique spaces together and expanding on the skill sets and opportunities for people to develop, and organisations and government agencies to develop, mostly around the defence space and policing and close personal protection sort of space, and have previously worked in a more diverse range. Obviously been on the planet for half a century, so you do a few things, and that's pretty much it. I should hit 21.
Yeah, I think we just got there, 21.
I think we just scraped in. I think it was 21 exactly.
21 exactly.
That's scraped in?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you won.
I think you won.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Best, better than Police, which is an inside joke. Now,
Okay.
To kick off, and I'd be love to just find out more about, like you said, business. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. High Fidelity Training is the facility you set up in Brisbane, or that's the company you run. What's happening there?
So High Fidelity Training has several elements to it. So there's 4 companies involved in it, and Kinetic is one of those companies, or the KEF Group. So the KEF Group's made up of several companies related to each other. It started out with Kinetic Fighting, which now sits in the Army Combative space, and we're responsible for, or the Australian Army and the New Zealand Army operates under the IP of Kinetic Fighting, the Army Combatives program. And then the High Fidelity Training is a way in which we can validate that training. So we're able to bring in cinematic stunt and special effects, equipment that's new to the market, and that allows people to hit, shoot, and scoot and do what they do, but not have to pull back on those skill sets. So normally, obviously, the person who's playing the enemy will be injured if you don't have the right equipment for that. Yep. And then it's measured with using basically astro skins that are used on the currently used on the space station, and we have a professor that then collates that information. Yeah, we've got some pretty serious technology.
Wow.
So we're able to measure everything, heart rate, blood pressure, the whole bit, just through one suit that fits under a soldier's equipment and body armor and so on. Doesn't sort of impede them at all.
Yeah.
And we can track whether they're working at optimal level, whether they're, you know, going through high stress and so forth.
Yep.
And then link that to the actual outcome of what they're trying to achieve.
Yep. So you can see some correlation between that data and positive or negative outcome from whatever that scenario you were training in.
Yeah. So basically, if you know, the soldier's hitting that 115 beats a minute, and they're working at an optimum level. It can't be sustained for, you know, a very long period, but they're working at an optimum level. If there's no effect, if it's a low fidelity exposure, which mostly is what people are dealing with, then, you know, you're not feeling immersed in the situation. You know what I mean? So you're not getting that response under pressure. So, you know, there's a lot of things we can do that we can add to pressure test things and add the pressure. It's the pressure and how you operate under pressure that defines your ability to do a task. So if you can't operate under the actual pressure of the requirement of that task, then you can't validate whether you're actually able to do it or not. So that's the difference between people who train, sit in front of a board where someone's pointing and saying, this is what you do, and then all of a sudden they're on the floor doing it and wondering why they're not capable. There has to be exposure to actually what you want people to achieve. And then we can measure that. And that's the new piece, is the ability to actually measure, scientifically measure and objectively measure what's going on, rather than just a lot of things rely on expert opinion rather than objective measurement. So we can do that.
I like that you said, like, it's that exposure to obviously a stimulus or a stress that gives you that information and allows you to track whether they're actually performing. Because that's obviously, like, we can create that correlation back to what we do as strength coaches, and it's very different. But it just comes back down to that exposure to constant stimulus. Yeah, and you're doing that through the effect on the muscle groups. So you're doing a very similar thing. It's the body, and it's the chemical effect to the brain and so on. And then okay, so here's the thing: you're doing strength training. Now, imagine your strength athletes are doing a competitive strength sport. So they need to do it for the Olympics, or they're lifting for whatever it is. Now you have this outside element that is not normally associated with the training in the gym. And it's how they deal with the pressure of that outside element that they may physically be able to lift for a gold medal, but if they can't mentally deal with a new pressure that's in play, they may not actually achieve their best lift or anything or something, 100%. I couldn't agree with that more. In going back to a little bit of what you said before with this new, the new toys, I guess you kind of put it as to create that extra stimulus, that extra pressure. What scenarios are you putting these people in? Well, for us, the difficult thing is that we're training to harm people without wanting to harm anyone. So it's a really odd space to work in. Absolutely. So, even saying it normally, and people just, all you got to do is you just got to, I guess, define what it is that you're doing, and that's exactly what we're doing. And when you realize that, you realize, well, these are all the difficulties that we have. Then you can only add more difficulty to that. So for policing, for instance, you want police to achieve dealing with violence and where someone is trying to harm them, and them minimizing as much harm as the harm to somebody else. Even more difficult. We have these expectations on people, and really we haven't sort of thought through what we're asking people to do. And it's quite difficult. And if the training's not there to support it, I mean, we can prove that that's the case. I mean, if the training's not there to support it, then it's not going to happen on the day. And all of those people will rely on the experiences to the exposure of the job they've had. And that's their high fidelity training. And that's why the results are so spread, and the way, so let's say police officers, for instance, the way they deal with things will be very, very different, spread across the board because of their own experiences and the different experiences of the police officers involved. So if you want a standardized training and a standardized response, you need training that is pressure tested and then can be proven to be effective.
And I guess, what would your thoughts be? Exposure is like so important, but how much coaching and training do, use police as an example, do they get in their 6 month or 6 month training sort of protocol?
Well, they do academy training.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you will put it in, say, Australian context, they'll train at the academy, but after that, the different things that they're exposed to, it'll depend on the state police force. Some require their constables to do defensive tactics once a year, some twice a year. And that's just a response to, I think Victoria's twice a year. It'll be a response to an incident that's happened. There'll be an inquest into it, and then there'll be a recommendation, and off they go. And they're limited. If you look at some of the US policing models, there's one department that's now requiring their police to be blue belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh.
Now, that's just one example. Is that a good idea, or is that not a good idea? We're yet to find out. So it sounds like a good idea. They're finding out that, I mean, obviously, if you have skill sets that are just a part of you, you know, and why do people talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Because it's not so much the structure and so forth, it's the constant pressure testing. And within Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, even if we want to talk about that particular sport, they do that pressure testing well on the ground, and then they fundamentally make mistakes with their self-defense, where it's not pressure tested, it's just a set of techniques. And they're doing the same mistakes that other martial arts has done. And then, you know, why do striking martial arts or striking sports do well? Pressure tested. So just so you understand, a lot of these sports do very well if they're pressure tested, but that pressure and the results you get are based on the rules of the sport. So as soon as you move outside of those rules, those people are under the same stresses of not have been exposed to certain things. So if you get guys and they wrestle, for instance, and you want to change the environment for them, so they're getting used to different environments, but they're not getting injured, you want a baseline capability, and then you start adding small things. So you might add foam blocks and so forth around the mat so that they can be tripped over or fall over stuff, not be injured, but now they're dealing with an environment that's more realistic. There's obstacles and so on. There's a wall, you know. Same as striking arts. You might do a striking art that has limited strikes that you're allowed to use. Well, as soon as someone does other things or they do grappling, then that has an effect. And that's why early UFCs were so difficult for strikers, because there was a bunch of grapplers being, you know, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys who were exposed to the striking and working out how to deal with that pressure of getting in so they can grapple where they're more comfortable. Now, you wouldn't think twice. MMA fighter wouldn't be able to compete if they weren't complete in striking and grappling. It's just stages we go through, and it's exactly the same for weapons training, military training. We go through these stages, and it's about, okay, well, the more lethal your training potentially can be, then the smarter and the more high-tech sort of capability we need to protect people in training. So, you know, that's what we try to avoid is death in training, which happens. And that's what we're working very hard on, removing the things that cause death in training, but still create the stimulus that the brain feels like it's done that live, sort of had that live exposure.
Trying to harm without harming, like you said. Yeah, it's a tightrope.
Well, we just need to delve into science, like stress, for instance, combat stress, which is, I mean, it's defined really as a stress that's induced through combat. Stress is stress. The body doesn't sort of sit back and go, oh, that's combat stress. You do, you know, intellectually, you sit back and go, a guy's shooting at me, I'm suffering stress, and it's combat related. Yeah, great. But the stresses on the body, I can induce those stresses in so many different ways. Exactly. So we're able to train without that combat danger, but still put people under stress. Does that make sense? And then teach them how to deal with that stress. Exactly. And then away you go.
And then, like you said, I guess we're spending more exposure with what you're doing there. That creates that experience they need. So when they get into the real world scenario, they have experience. Would that be right?
Correct. Because we don't fall back on our learning. We don't. Basically, what we're taught doesn't. There's a Rolex of information. So you know how you've heard the term, your life flashes before your eyes when you're in this near-death experience. And what's happening there is that your mind is Rolexing through your entire life's experience, looking for a solution that's going to keep you alive. That's what it's doing. So you go, oh, my life's flashing before my eyes. Yeah. Where else have I experienced something similar to this that's going to get me out of the shit? And so off goes the Rolex. Now, education, stuff you read in a book, stuff you saw in a film, will not come up in that Rolex. That's why you say, my life flashed before my life, not the John Wick movie #2. My life flashed before my life. So, yeah.
Well, you mean to say, watching John Wick 2 doesn't mean that I'm a badass now?
That's right. So it's like it's my son. Like I jump on with my son on PlayStation or whatever, and he's smashing me at some close quarter battle bloody thing, and he goes, "Dad, I thought you were good at this stuff." It's like, mate, you've got to. I'm not good at the key, mate. I'm struggling. Yeah.
I like how you.
Yeah, you're right. You caught me out.
I like the reference you made before, that stress is stress, and it's something that we advocate a lot here. Is like it's the same chemical response in the body. It's the same hormones, the chemical that are released from the brain, and it's just how the more we can expose ourselves to stress, the better we get to deal with stress, whatever it comes out as. And that's obviously been a big part of what you do.
Yes.
Obviously, from the way you're talking, there's obviously a military background, but what started the passion behind High Fidelity? What started the passion to, I guess, upskill and create better training systems for our defence force police services?
I think there was a couple of things there, but one was through my own exposure on the battlefield and realising being very confident in an area of combat, being hand to hand, and then realizing how different or how incredibly high that stress is when it's life and death, or when you believe it to be a life and death situation. And then realizing that, I've gotten through it, but I've had, decades of training at that stage. And, that was, I think the last time I was on battlefield is 2010. So it's 11 years ago now. So, I had a few decades in martial arts across the board, even at that stage. And then I realized, well, how is someone who's doing 1 week of training going to respond to this? And that's the thing, not only do we have to train people, we've got to do it in a very limited amount of time. So it's about linking that training and exposure to other skill sets that reside with the soldier, and then complementing those skill sets rather than trying to give we're going to do a week of martial art throws and kicks and stuff like that. It's really about how can I use my body as a weapon and complement my shooting and CQB skill sets and so forth at close quarters. So that's sort of the difference. It's a much more of a scientific approach and not about what I'm into, like with the ongoing training, sometimes that's mistaken. Like people go, you guys do a lot of grappling and striking, this and that with your shooting. What we're doing with that is, yes, that's continuation training. There'll be soldiers that don't get exposed to that or don't, their primary job doesn't allow them to do that as much as maybe we would like. But that's just a matter of fact. And then there'll be others that are incredibly into the skill set. So what we're doing is really creating future subject matter experts who become sort of the font of knowledge that can allow things to be simplified. So to simplify something, you have to have a huge amount of knowledge and information. And it's a little bit, and where I sort of got exposed to that was at the Australian Institute of Sport, where you'll talk to a professor who lectures, at university, who wrote the books that universities are using, literally wrote the book that they're using for a particular subject, And when they talk to you, you will understand exactly, like you can understand what they're talking about. The knowledge is so deep that a layperson can understand what they're talking about. You talk to one of their PhD students and they've lost you in a sentence. Like they're often, talking in their space as if they're talking to another PhD student. Yeah, it actually takes a lot of knowledge and you need to have a really deep understanding to put it in terms where someone who has no background in your skill gets it and understands what you're talking about.
That'd come with a great challenge, because if you get a person, maybe you get them for a week or two, and then you've got to skill them up to a certain level, and then if you're working in a group scenario, you've potentially got 5-10 people, but then they've all got their own little different levels of knowledge and understanding as well. That starts getting quite tricky, I imagine.
Yeah, well, the big thing is how do we work as a team? The other side of it is how often does it happen? Like, how often are soldiers encountering close combat, hand-to-hand type of situations? Why is it happening? There's so many things to look at. And what's the difference between that, our experience in the last 20 years and, our longest war in our history, compared to maybe a peer-on-peer war with an enemy that's has like training and equipment. So there's so many elements to look at, and then you put that together, and then you come up with the best solution that will work most of the time. You're not going to get every answer right, and that's where that continuation training of individuals to learn how to problem solve, and that's a big thing too. How do I problem solve under stress? Yeah. So that comes to understanding how to control stress, and that would be something that your athletes, doesn't matter who it is, they'd be interested in. And that's how I ended up at the Australian Institute of Sport with the Combat Centre, was a mindset, that side of it. They were interested in I guess the combative or combat background that I had in the Special Forces background, and then what's the culture and how do we link that together? And there's a lot that came out of that. And it was always this two-way thing. So, armies have always, well, hang on, what are athletes doing for training? And that was a moment where, it was some quite smart people there who were looking at, well, hang on, what are warriors doing? Why are they able to operate in complex environments and find solutions to problems when they're not at their optimal physical level of capability? And the reason for that too is just simply other stresses. So if you're you know, you wouldn't recommend any of your athletes before a competition to go walk 5Ks in sub-zero temperature and then turn up. And also, by the way, I don't want you to sleep the night before. So there's stresses that are very unique to soldiers. So you know, it's like, okay, well, if you can operate under this sort of stress, then does that diminish other things that people see as being stressful? So it was a little bit of that. It was us applying all these different things outside of the athlete's cycle where they've got to compete, and putting them under these different stresses and showing them how to deal with that stress, this sort of high level stress that they hadn't been exposed to, and then showing them how to link that management of stress to their athletic competition side of the house. Yeah, right. So it's like, if you can deal with this, like, you know, you can deal with these other stresses. And so it was a little bit of that.
Yeah, and then when it's your moment as an athlete.
Very experimental.
Yeah. And I mentioned, then as your moment as an athlete, or as your moment when you're in the battlefield real world scenario, you're going to think clearly and execute the right way if you can manage and deal with that stress.
So, exactly. So when you're under stress, you know, you'll hit this sort of peak. So straight away your heart rate goes up, okay, because it needs to start pumping through the body and get your mind working at an optimal level, right? You're switched on. You're not half asleep through a near-death experience. So it's a little bit like, what's an example that maybe people have been exposed to? A car that skids out of control in a wet or something for a second, you know, all of a sudden you're awake. You're like, whoa, that felt like I had 15 coffees, just boom, I'm awake, because something unusual happened that's life-threatening potentially. So it's just that instant, up goes the heart rate, stress, because I need you to be in the moment so that we don't die. You know, so your brain's saying, hey, be with me now, stop listening to the song. We're not doing what we're meant to be doing in this car. We need to stay alive, right? So there's that hit. So that, you know, now optimally you're working at about 115 beats a minute. Now, once you start pushing into 145 and above, you start to have the effects of what's called combat stress, with narrowed vision and audio exclusion and all these different things. And it varies depending on the person who's sort of dealing with the moment. But what's happening is, you know, your mind now is, for instance, people go, I couldn't believe I could see all the detail on this particular thing, like maybe a gun or a knife that was in front of them. And well, what's happening isn't that you're seeing greater detail. Your mind is excluding everything that it sees as not being a threat. Wow. And this is also why, I'm going down a rabbit hole a little bit, but this is also why, you know, in policing actions or military, people can be killed by somebody else more easily, because they're so focused on what tried to just kill them just at that moment. All of a sudden something comes out and they don't have their normal ability to understand. And that's why you see people on ranges, it's getting a little bit out of control, but they're doing things like where they're meant to be looking away from the target to bring themselves back out. So again, these are skills that you can apply to athletes, that when you know there's a particular response, and if you start measuring that response, like actually go, you know what, this competition, we're going to do this, and we're going to measure the way this is having an effect on you. We're going to see when this is having an effect on you. Like, what are you like in the change rooms, waiting? What stress are you under waiting in anticipation? What stress are you under when the event is happening? Like, and that's always going to be different for different people. Now, and normally that's the job of coaches, just through their intuition and experience, they observe the athlete, and hopefully you've got a coach that's able to understand you and get you working at your optimum level. But, you know, if you could measure that, even the coach isn't in doubt now. Like, they know this is how Jono works in competition. This is what he needs or she needs to bring them to an optimal level of operating. So getting back to the heart rate, what's affecting you is not so much the heart rate, but that raises your breath rate. And this high breath rate stops or lowers your cognitive ability to function. So you you're relying on instinct now. And the instinct is only related to your experience. You see how it's starting to fit in now?
It's,
and so, yeah.
Have you, sorry.
So just quickly on that, I know there's a little delay.
Yeah.
So it's actually learning breath control and how to do something. I can't do much about my heart rate, but I can do something about my breathing. So when I identify this and I'm aware of it, I can do something about my breath rate. And then that is what starts to bring my heart rate back down. And it's also why soldiers are meant to be fit. They're not meant to be fit just so they look half decent in the uniform. They're meant to be fit so when they're under combat stress and their heart rate elevates, it doesn't go through the roof because they're already sitting at 90 beats a minute.
Yeah, right.
You want them to be at a baseline so that they're under combat stress, when they're suffering the stress of combat, their heart rate is not being pressured by their lack of fitness. And then you go, well, hang on, how do these older guys operate? Sergeants and so forth who are 10 years older and whatever. Well, that's the whole mechanism of the army, was that they're meant to be experienced people, so that their experience stops their heart rate going through the roof. And then that's how, that's how it plays out.
That's very interesting.
Well, it's meant to be, yeah.
A lot of what you described, and I'm not sure, have you ever delved into, I guess, the flow state or the research done by Csikszentmihalyi?
Yeah.
Very similar. Like, it's something they've tested very much in, like, what's the term? The extreme athletes, like your Red Bull Air athletes and all that sort of stuff. And it comes back to like the whole, everything that you're saying about it, just exposing yourself to more scenarios, more stress, to allow that state to come naturally. And correct me if I'm wrong, it comes from with.
And what's an extreme athlete? What's an extreme athlete? What's your opinion? What do you see as being an extreme athlete?
I guess we're exposed to, an extreme sport in the sense of powerlifting, where we're asking people to put upwards of 400 kilos, 500 kilos now that we've seen internationally, on their back and squat with it. And then you got the comparison of these extreme athletes in terms of like the Red Bull, climbing rocks,
Yes.
snowboarding, things like that.
Let me add a little bit to that.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll add something to that. The extreme sports and athletes that you're talking about, especially in a lot of these things that are backed by Red Bull, the element that is in there that is different to many sports that makes it extreme is the higher risk of death.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got guys doing with the aircraft racing, guys doing base jumping, all the different things. There is a high element of risk of death if there is a failure. And that is the extreme element to that sport.
Yeah. And they'd be playing with the same thing.
So it's a very interesting thing. And yes, correct. So, you're going, okay, well, you need to have certain things. Well, one of the things is that you need to be very, very comfortable in dealing with a high stress situation.
Mm.
And again, you may know how to fly really well, but as in parachute, your skill sets, but maybe you haven't jumped off a cliff before and the land wasn't vertical traveling, as you're traveling along next to it because you jumped out of a plane. That in itself is going to add a huge amount of stress that your skill set hasn't been exposed to yet. Yeah. Because initially your stress was, you want to jump out of a plane. Now you got used to that and you're all over it. But now you're doing off a rock or a building. You've got this land that's literally traveling, or you're traveling next to this piece of land that if you hit that, at terminal speed, you're dead. And it's just a matter of making a mistake in the way you're flying. So it doesn't take much, you could say, well, technically on paper, this guy's a fantastic parachutist. Yeah, but he's never been exposed to jumping off a cliff before. So there's these are the things, you know, rock climbers. Yeah, you get rock climbers, right? Yep, and it's a gnarly thing to do, and so on. I'm talking about things that I've done myself, so I can sort of relate it. Like I would not want to base jump. Like, and I've gotten older now, so I'm a little bit less sort of what's the word? Reckless. Right? I have a greater I have a greater sense of my mortality.
Yes.
So, but rock climbing, you go, righto, it can be gnarly and so on, but you're putting a rope in and so forth. Now, rock climbing with a rope above you is not really stressful at all, but people need to be exposed to those stages. Then you're putting your own protection in. And then you've got the nutters out there that, oh, you know, how about I climb this and learn it, and then I'm going to do it without a rope. Yeah. No rope, you know. And it's like it's all climbing, but just the consequences of mistakes in that are completely different.
And then I imagine those guys without the ropes, through exposure and experience, if you measured their heart rate like you were talking, they're probably just humming along.
Cool as a
90 beats a minute.
They will be in the flow.
To rock, right?
They will be in the flow.
Yeah.
Yep. They'll be in the flow. And at the moment, yep.
I was going to say, I've seen those videos of
Sorry, go ahead.
Alex Honnold, you know, free solo, and you'll see footage of him climbing those faces, and he's literally just like humming to himself as he's climbing up, as if like I was walking the hallway humming to myself. Like, cool as a cucumber.
Well, yes, and so what have they done? You know, they've been exposed to years and years of climbing in a much safer format. I mean, you don't just grab a kid and go for it, mate. Like you start off to make sure they're safe and so on. But the other thing is they'll climb those routes that they want to do with free climbing. They'll go over it and know all their moves, know what needs to happen, know where the crux of the climb is and so on to make sure that they can do it safely. You know, they're not just going to smash a wall that they've never been on. But in saying that, if the gradient is not difficult for them, when I first started climbing, I had ropes on and was hooking on, and I'd had people walk past me with their ropes over their shoulders and shit, still going to another climb further up before they hook on. Because where I was learning how to climb for them was like a footpath. They didn't give a shit. Off they went. It's like, okay, no worries. So, you know,
meanwhile, you're fucking hanging on.
Yeah. I'm like, the guy just walks past me with his ropes wrapped around, and another fella following him. It's like, sweet, good. I feel special now.
Just a little bit of switching gears here. Having been exposed to some very extreme, and as you mentioned before, some near death, I guess, situations. How do you like the daily stresses of life? Do they just not faze you?
That's an interesting question. So what ends up happening for me is I look for stressful situations. Yeah. So now what's that a result of? That's you become comfortable in the uncomfortable.
That's a conditioning thing.
Like business. Yeah, you become conditioned, and I guess it's what does life feel like, you know? And this is a big problem. It's an interesting thing because I've talked to a few guys in the States about it, and one fellow from the US Special Operations said to me, we don't suffer from post-traumatic stress, we suffer from lack of traumatic stress. You know, it's you're exposed to it so often that you're constantly looking to feel alive. So the daily routine of life, you just are numb to. And I don't know the answer to these things. I've not been suicidal myself, but you know, that's probably a big part of it, is just not feeling like there's anything, life is mundane. It can, or you're not feeling it, being able to feel like you're partaking in it. And another group of people that would be interested to, your listeners would be interested to hear about, is elite athletes. And you've probably been exposed to that yourselves. What happens when the Olympics are over? What happens when you retire? And so many of them are going through the similar trauma as elite soldiers and so on, where you think, was that the apex of my life? Was that the pinnacle of my achievements? And I think the goal is to make sure that your service or your sport at elite level is not the best that you have in the tank. It's not, you're going to have a lot more in front of you, and just to grab hold of everything and just go for it. Now, you need to do that in a productive way that's safe. A lot of people do fall into alcohol or drugs, speeding in cars, just a whole range of different things. So you've got to, I guess, find an outlet that is more beneficial for you in the long term, that has a long-term outcome. And for me, that's been business. And I love working in spaces that there hasn't been a lot of work in before. So just new ideas or new things, just getting in there. So I've been fortunate in just getting involved in a bunch of things that are sort of new capability, or things that are, I've got a friend who used to, I'm starting to have other people that I'm not used to dealing with have sort of fallen into my circle of friendships. And one of them, he was the former CEO of Barclay Bank in Australia. And he had me come in and talk to the vice presidents of the bank. I don't know anything about banking. He goes, I don't need to know anything about banking. Plenty of people know about banking. I want you to talk about, this and just how you deal with it. So off I went. And that's exciting, because it's exciting because it's like, it's an environment that I'm not exposed to. So new environment, new stresses. Now I'm excited. And, so it's same with this, it's exciting working with new technology and new capability, and what can we do with it? And on the byproduct, there's a positive outcome for people. So it's not a negative outcome. I'm not trying to, how fast can I drive my car down the street and, end up losing my license or killing someone in an accident. So it's a better productive way of dealing with needing to feel.
I like the way you kind of spoke about how, athletes do experience that. And it's not to say it's the same, but similar trauma coming out, they retire and they're like, oh shit, was that the apex? But same thing with you going and speak in the bank. They have this wealth of experience now that you can't teach that. So imparting that experience, imparting that knowledge and their experience, for me, is a really good way for them to deal with those daily routines. And as you said, find another exciting avenue to go down. And I think too many people, especially, I guess, relating it back to our industry, get caught up in, the be all and end all of being an athlete, but forget there is so much more to it and so much more they have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, where does the mind take over from the body? That's the other thing too. And, I'm sure, I think about guys who, like swimmers, for instance, and, I can't think of anything more boring than to go swimming and be in that pool day in and day out. Now, but the interesting thing is, there must be some serious battles with the mind. That is interesting to me.
100%.
Not the swimming, what is going through those minds day in and day out. And, and then you stop and think about, well, hang on, I became an Olympic champion and okay, well, what did you do? What did you think about? How did you deal? It's just so much that people can give, but they probably think in very sort of these terms of, well, physically I'm not capable of doing it anymore, so I can't win that gold medal. I'm done. And it's like, mate, you know, you've got to redefine yourself, and you've got to understand that, you know, I mean, one thing I looked at was, what have I done for the longest, you know, besides learning to wipe my own butt and walking, right? What have I done the longest in my life? And it'd be martial arts. Now, anything I start now, I do it out of enjoyment and so forth, but everything is about leveraging off the thing that I've been doing the longest in my life. So I have 40 years experience in martial arts. How can I leverage from that experience into other parts of my life? Now, if I just thought, well, I'll just teach martial arts, okay, I can do that. But, you know, if you look at what I'm doing now, it's all leveraging from the thing that I'm most experienced in, and then the segues that takes me, and then the other experiences that gives me. So it's a lot that can be done. And then you can, I mean, for myself, I'm quite excited. I'm going back to school, and I was meant to start in beginning of 2020, and it's in the US. So the problem with that was COVID. So, you know, it's been sort of on hold now for 2 years, but I'll kick off next year. Apparently, we should be good to go next year. But that's exciting, and I got into that course because of my experience, not because of my ability to here's my entry level scores. It's because, hang on, you have the prerequisite of experience required to do this course, which is a, you know, a very sort of course that, you know, you really they sort of weigh up heavily who they let in. So your experiences mean something. And if you can leverage off that experience and add more and more experience to it and add segues to it, you're creating something unique. And then you bring that to what you do.
You're always going to love what you do too. Like, you know, for you, martial arts being such a passion of yours, but everything's just following on from martial arts and one thing or another. There mustn't be a day you don't love going to what you do.
No, I if you said to me, what would you do if you didn't have to work, it'd be what I'm doing now. So, you know, that's an interesting, it's funny you say that, you know. I've had some run-ins because of that, because it's like, you don't knock off. What from? Life. Like, this is my life. It's meant to be. If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, there's a whole bunch of shit that people say, right? People really struggle with the other end. What happens when you're actually doing that? Like, and you know, I had a partner, a lovely person, but she just couldn't get it. And it was like, you know, you need to know, well, this is what I love doing, so it's what I want to do all the time. I can't help that.
I got a good friend of mine.
So it can be hard for.
Sorry, bro. I was going to say, a good friend of mine and client of mine, he's owned and run businesses his whole life, and he always says, I never had holidays because I didn't need them. Like, whereas you sit and engage with your friends and peers who are doing more of a conventional job, and the whole time they're just waiting for it to finish the day, finish the work day, get to the holiday, get to the weekend. And you're like, man, I love Mondays. Mondays are sick. Like, they're all the same.
And that's the thing. Like, this is work for us, and we're getting to meet and chat to people like yourself, and it's just two guys on a couch having a lot of banter with a guy who's got two fucking sick guns on the background.
It's a pretty good back office, I think.
It's a pretty good background, eh?
Germans do make it good. No worries. I've got some different ones up on the wall, but it's a good one.
That's pretty cool, man. Something I'm curious about. It's a bit of a change in tack, but curious how or what you do to factor recovery in for stress for what you're doing with your training models there. If you've got, say you've got people for weeks or whatever, how does that incorporate? Do you look to try and increase stress and get more and more and more stress to get that exposure to take them to the edge? Or you think you need to throw some time off? And what would you do to try and get that stress level and decrease that for them?
And to add on, if you increase stress, are you increasing recovery as well, like at the same rate?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I guess people are looking at recovery. Okay, when you control the environment, you can remove the stress instantly. So you can put people, like, imagine walking into a room set and you're walking along, and we can put smell in there. So we're affecting your different senses, yeah. And then there's noise. We've got dogs barking and stuff, and all of a sudden there's a flash where someone in the dark has run across in front. Now, no one's touched you, but I'll guarantee you're stressed. And if I say to you, you're going in there into a combat situation, and they're going to shoot, and they're going to shoot you with, man marking ammunition or whatever, or drive you into a wall or whatever, you're already starting to hypen up, But as soon as that you're out of that, you're no longer in that environment. So what damages people is the overwhelming effects of things that you've never been exposed to. Whereas these soldiers, the people you're training, they've gone through a graduated training program. So they have been exposed to things. This is now just putting in a more realistic environment, but it's still not the actual environment. They still know that they're safe. There's consequences of what's going to happen. Will be a debrief to talk about the mistakes and why do they think it happened and what can we do to rectify it. As soon as you take people out of that sort of high stress, you turn the button, switch off, it's very different. And that's different to the battlefield where, hey, you're there and you're not going anywhere until you go somewhere. This fight is not going to end until, you're dead or the enemy's dead or whatever, it's going to have to play out. Now that, and the longer you're involved in that and the longer you're exposed to that, that's where the stress becomes damaging. That's where the effects become long lasting. But just training where we hit the stress, we can just turn that off again. It's the same as you got athletes ready to go out to do their thing. That's gone as soon as they're walking out on stage. They're suffering from another stress now, or they're wrapped. They're happy because the stress is over of anticipation. They might be someone that thrives with the stage and the actual what they're doing, or it could be that the crowd stresses them. So going out now, they're being pumped by stress. Because of the crowd. So, but you can probably, none of those athletes are going to say, a week later, that crowd just really shook me up. I don't know how I'm going to cope, cope from, it's really, once they're out from the crowd, it's done. You know what I'm saying? It's more of their own stress of, like public speaking and so forth. As soon as you're not in front of the public speaking, it stops. So that's how you sort of, look after people. Now, if people are reliving a stress that they've had that hasn't been managed, that needs to be something that if that happens, we'll know people's experiences. If they're trainees, they don't tend to have those experiences, but if they're seasoned soldiers, that they may have. So you manage it and you speak to everyone beforehand and they understand what you're doing. And the fact that they're still soldiering as well, that means that, they should be good to go. So there's a bunch of things. And we make sure that we're on top of that. So we had people playing enemy and role playing for the military not so long ago, up to 100 people. And the same thing, we had a psychologist there the whole time, and we just check on people and Mostly everyone's just having a great time. They said, you know, we would have done this for free. It's a fantastic experience and we're getting paid for it. It's amazing. So, you know, it's yeah, so it just depends but some people were struggling and they were people that had previous experience. So it's like, no worries, pull you out of that.
Yeah, and then just work with them. Man, something I wrote down in my little notes and I just had to ask you about it. I bung up the pronunciation, but the Chiron armor suit, the black man suit that I see on your Instagram of you just hitting it in the head with the butt of a gun and kicking it, and punching it, and shooting it. Can you tell me about that? Because I'm very curious about that thing.
Yeah, so that's a sort of it's an armor set that was originally designed for a sporting context that we sort of married up with the guys who created that and invented it, which Chiron guys, the terminology is correct. And then let's look at a military application. How can we use it for training, high fidelity training? That, and once I explained, you know, and they were sort of getting onto that idea. So we sort of married up, I think, quite some time ago, actually, maybe 5 years ago. And we've just been working on that. And then the concept of, well, can it be used as protection and armor? Because the mobility is quite good in it and so on. So, yeah, we're working with that. But for training, it's good. But obviously the higher tech the equipment is and more capable, the more expensive it becomes. So then it's about, okay, how can sort of governments get the best bang for buck and not be sort of and so that's been a few things that we're working on, but it's going quite well. It's getting exactly the effect that we want from soldiers. So, you know, they realize, as soon as you realize that, you know, if you don't do what you need to do properly, this is going to keep happening. Like this is coming at you. They react, and we measured. So I haven't put out some footage yet. I think one of them was some soldiers being attacked, and those soldiers had we were measuring the effect, and their effects were through the roof, and they even knew what we're about to do. Wow. And as soon as we had people being shot and blood, you know, coming out of person's shirt and so on. Oh, wow. The whole idea with that was to shock them, like that. Hang on, he's been shot. It's like you're doing your job, and their heart rate went straight up. So it's like this little effect that we did, which was just a movie effect, if you like, and all of a sudden their heart rate's going, and it's, you know, everyone's reacting, and they were in the moment. That's high fidelity. And we could prove that we got that response out of the soldiers. And the difference to that with low fidelity is someone, you know, hey, you know, Darren, it's your turn to be the bad guy now. Oh, do I have to? And it comes out and you got ya, ha, ha, ha. You know, what are we having for lunch today? Yeah, whatever. It's low fidelity training. And mostly the training that people see as reality-based training is low fidelity, and our goal is to turn that around and expose people to as much high fidelity as possible.
Because you must have some fun sitting down. I don't know if fun's the right word, but sitting down and just creating those scenarios.
No, it's a good word.
Just thinking outside the box on how to just create and just start. Do you start even thinking, like, wonder how it will play out? And which direction it can potentially go, or how they'll deal with it.
Yeah, what happens for me is it's about, first of all, how do we and the customer get the best effect, you know, out of what we're doing, and then it's like. But for me, what excites me is when someone walks in with a new technology, and we've got some new stuff that's just come in recently. And it's unbelievable. It's like it's just a new capability. And then my brain just explodes because I think, hang on, if we link this to this, and then this goes with this, and that goes with that, it's you know, it's amazing. So when you're training people like in combat stuff, like I'll give you an example, like firearms training. There are 3 elements to it, maybe. So that depends on the unit that you're in, so the amount of funding they get, and so on. So 3 elements if you don't have to worry about money, right? And in special forces, you're well looked after to do training. Now, that's blank fire, which the Army, generally speaking, does a fair bit of, but in special forces, you do the least amount of blank firing. And then the next is man-marking munition, like paint, right? And there's other rounds, there's many rounds, and there's some really incredible stuff out there. UTM's got some great stuff and so on. And then there's live rounds. Now, you go, well, wouldn't the pinnacle be shooting live bullets, you would think? The answer is no. Live bullets let you feel this is the sound and the effect that is going to be on your weapon when you're in battle. This is the reality of what's going to happen when you're in battle. But it's not the ultimate of what you want to do, because it's the most limiting thing that you can do, because you're shooting targetry. And then you go, well, how do I get the targets to move? And then you get robotic targetry and things like that. Up it goes. But one of the best things to do is the man-marking munition, where you're shooting something that functions exactly like a firearm, but I can actually shoot an enemy that's firing back at me. And then, you know, the last piece of that is blank fire. But you see there's 3 elements there. Now, if you can work out how to train with all that put together and nobody gets killed, that's really what we're doing. Our whole thing is about how do we get as close to the real thing without anyone getting killed or hurt. And that's it. That's the nut we have to crack. So everything we do is, it's like, how can I, you need to understand your core business. Now, you probably sit back and go, hey, well, what are we about? You know, people have these mission statements and so on. The worst thing you can do is make a mistake with really what your core business is. So let's say that you make the best drill bits in the world, like for drills, through drilling a hole, right? And I say to you, what's the goal of your company? And they go, oh, it's to make the best drill bit on the planet. That company will fail. And I'll tell you why it fails. They don't understand what their core business is. And that's exactly what happened to Kodak. And I you know, I predicted Kodak, and it's a shame what happened to Kodak, because they invented the digital camera. But they thought people were into photos. So what am I talking about with the drill bit company? You say we want to make the best drill bit. Your core business is to make a hole, not make a drill bit. So if you can find a better, cheaper way of making a hole that doesn't require a drill or a drill bit, that should be what your company does. Then you'll destroy every other drill bit company. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, what is my goal to use certain armor or certain this or certain that? No. My goal is to create a battlefield scenario as close to the real thing to induce the stress and get the greatest value for training possible without anyone being mentally or physically harmed in the process. That's it. Anything that allows me to do that better, I want to take on board. And that's it.
Yeah, thinking like that versus how Kodak was thinking, that allows you to constantly evolve, essentially, not being stuck with just
yeah. So someone in Kodak comes up with a digital camera and they go, well, they just put it on a shelf because they go, we're into photos. No, you're not. You're into image capture. And even if you don't know how that looks in the future, at least you're a part of the development of the future, not someone who's just been suffering the consequences of the future.
I love that. Hell yeah, bro. Man, and also just change your pace, because I know you said martial art is the core of you, essentially. How did that start with you? What did you come across first? What was the first step on the Metal Dojo for you?
Oh, well, when I started like late 70s, early 80s. So martial arts back then wasn't like today. It was just clubs. So you had a martial art club that ran 2 classes a week, and you didn't have choice. You know, like what's the martial art club in your area? And you get the yellow pages because we didn't have computers or anything. So you get the yellow pages out, look for the martial art in your area, and you know, the Taekwondo school came up, and I had a choice of 2 martial arts. The Taekwondo one, never heard of it, but it looked like karate, and that's the sort of thing I wanted to do. And also, it was super popular back then. So you'd go and you do your 2 classes, but there'd be 60 people in there. It'd just be packed. And yeah, it was because Bruce Lee was a big thing, I think it was close to Enter the Dragon in the 70s came out and so on. So, so now my motivation was just the standard motivation that a lot of people had, which was being bullied. So, I wasn't good at running, so I had to learn how to fight. That was pretty much it.
I like the approach. Mate, what I'd like to hit you with next is how we like to take things to the end, and that is with 10 incredibly random questions. We're going to think fast.
All right.
Where you go with them. I'm curious to see what you think of these questions.
Okay, I just want you to know something.
Yes.
I want you to know my answers will be faster than what you think. It's just that we've got a decent lag with our communications here. So people at home need to realise that I've answered this much faster than what it may seem.
All right. First one for you, sir. Would you rather throw away love or money?
Money.
What are you watching on Netflix right now?
Fargo.
What is the strangest thing in your fridge?
Homemade paleo bread.
I like that. Favorite toy growing up as a kid?
Plastic gun.
I like it. Now we got
and
one behind
Star
you.
Wars figures that I should have kept for millions. Yeah.
Fucking oath.
When do you feel the most in control?
Oh, fuck. I had them all. What was that last one?
Sorry, bro. We wound you up on that one. When do you feel the most in control?
In my own space, in my office where I am now.
Nice. How do you rate your cooking?
Shit.
That's very honest. I like it.
Yeah, I eat out a lot. I love chefs. I love their great work, and
I
home
just like
cooked
to
meal
call that
just as
working
good.
with specialists.
I love to work with specialists. Yeah, chefs.
Now you're going to write a song. About yourself? What are you going to call it?
No idea. That's the name of the song. Not that I have no idea.
If you could change your name to anything, what would it be?
I've already done it. It's already changed. So I've got my stepfather's surname.
Oh, cool, right?
So there you go.
Now, what do you think?
You would struggle if you with my actual surname.
Oh, really?
Oh, social media. All right. Business-wise, it's good. Life for people, not so good. They need to, be able to put their phone down for a day. It'll be amazing the result. Don't get your news feed from Facebook.
You mean the news on Facebook?
We're not the United States. We're a different country. Yeah. What's that?
You mean the news on Facebook isn't necessarily real?
Well, it's real for everyone because
it's real for everyone.
Whatever you believe to be reality, you will find people in the world that believe you. So yeah.
It makes it scary.
It's a nasty piece of work. Yeah.
100%.
Now, sir, the last one and my most interesting one. What is your favourite T-shirt you wear?
Oh, kinetic fighting T-shirts, mate. Of course.
Well played. You can find them on the website. If people
And
are
you can get them at the kinetic fighting shop.
Yes.
What's that?
You can find them on the website if you're interested to get one.
Yeah,
We'll link up for it, of course.
Yeah, absolutely you can, mate. If you happen to hit kineticshop.com, I think it is, or you go to our website, kineticfighting.com.au, you can get yourself a shirt, hat, a tactical pen, which is very good for smashing. So what it does, it's made of steel, and you use it to crack the window open if you crash your car, or to take notes on someone assaulting you. You can take notes down of the attack, so you can report it back to police. It also can be used as an improvised weapon if you were to do so, but it's illegal to carry something as a weapon. Yep. So you should carry it only as a pen.
I love that.
That's amazing. Paul, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show this morning and giving up your time. Obviously, it's a very busy schedule for yourself, so we really appreciate it. We'll put up that website in our show notes, and that way people, if they do want to reach out, can have a way of contacting yourself.
No worries at all, and it's a pleasure to meet both of you, and I'm glad it worked out this time. And sorry about the last attempt. Yeah.
It's all good, brother, mate. Again, yeah, really appreciate you coming on, mate, and you're doing some cool stuff, mate. We look forward to continuing following and seeing it all.
Mate, thank you.
No worries at all.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you very much. Take care.
See you, mate. Bye.
I'm going to taste so bad, but we'll be back real fast.